Well, today's topic is social learning. What do we want to talk about?
I'm Heidi from ESL, and I'm interested in what people use Canvas groups for, maybe besides peer review, and the collaborations for. So Canvas groups and Canvas collaborations.
All right.
My name is Kenny. I'm a grad student from kinesiology. I guess best practices of online groups. What I'm interested in.
I hate the phrase best practices because it seems so finalized. Like here into the future forever, it will be best practices. Some say good practices or emerging good practices.
I'm fine with that.
According to you.
Yeah. I have disclaimers and qualifiers. Is that really the best? And rather than get hung up on that discussion. I just call it
Angela, biomolecular chemistry. I guess what are good ways to check in with groups and see how the whole group dynamics working beyond sort of tattling on each other? Like just more efficient ways to sort of check in with groups.
Good. We got some new info on that. Megan.
Megan from School of Medicine, and we do a lot of small projects. I'm interested in maybe doing semester-long projects and seeing how other people have good practices on how to scale up.
I'm only interested in the best. I'm sorry.
Small versus big projects. Good. James, let's jump back to you.
James McKay, academic technology, learning technology consultant. Maybe this isn't a fair place for this, but good resources for convincing people the value of social learning.
Good.
And maybe even put that in context, like most recently at the blended learning event, where people we're talking about social learning.
Yep.
And people are like, yeah, I tried an online discussion board once and it was horrible and I've never done anything like that again.
Right.
And so I want to be able to be like, just because the first time wasn't fabulous doesn't mean we should just throw the whole thing away.
Resources for persuasion. The activities sheet has a lot right now. Excellent. Greg.
Greg Hunt, with academic technology. I work with our online course production units. So we work with a lot of instructors on campus, and one of the things that we hear from instructors when they talk about peer-to-peer learning or groups is just, some students really like it, some students don't like it. It's the accountability piece. You get the same thing as one student who does all the work and the other is riding the coattails, which is the same, to me, kind of some of the same stuff that happens in traditional face-to-face classrooms as well. But just interested what other thoughts people have on that, and if there's any strategies that people have had success with here in the room.
Good. Strategies for making sure they do it.
Best strategies.
Lauren.
I'm Lauren. I do language stuff. I am a active teaching lab frequent flyer.
That's
Here
right.
to
Earned all kinds of compliments.
earn as many points as I can in figuring out how to bring humor into social learning in Canvas so that it's not so dry.
Humor.
That sense of when you do social learning in a traditional classroom, it sort of organically evolves and you have that energy. How do you do that online?
Ooh, online. That's a huge qualifier. All right, good challenge.
And Cliff, Megan, I don't know if we met this night. So Cliff, I work with AT, and I'm just here to frequently attending just to see what people are talking about.
All right. We have boy, which one should we start with? Let's start with the resources and the what is it and why should we do it sort of stuff. And I'll make this bigger so we can do that. A Again, at the very top of your activity sheet, you've got instructions to get to the Canvas course, where you will find a live embedded version of this that you can add your own suggestions and thoughts and whatever at the very bottom under one of the questions and lab notes. So that's a thing. The other thing is all of these things, all of the links there work in that version, the digital version of it. And we've done quite a few of them throughout there. Jennifer did a really good job this week, I think, in putting together the resources, or a lot of resources. And this is just the beginning. Like, there are so many resources on social learning. And if you think back, James.
So, like, can we say something like, educational research shows that social learning always or almost always adds to a student's experience? Like, are there any grand sweeping claims that we can make about social learning?
If you remember, who's that innovation guy? The curve of innovation.
The gears are spinning,
Yeah.
right?
That idea that there are innovators here and there are laggards here and there are mainstream. Well, pretty much any, I mean, you look at any bell curve of, does anything work for everybody? The answer is no. There are some people who absolutely hate and abhor and will never, they will actively work against social learning, right? And you probably think of a couple of those people that you know in your life who would do that. So, no, there is nothing that we can make a grand claim. We can say, for most people, yes. As social mammals and tribe-oriented and generally empathetic creatures, the idea of helping each other out to solve problems, to work together, this is a lot of what society is based on, right? So overall, yes, we can say that for the most part, we are social creatures. We solve problems together better than we solve problems individually. If you look at active learning, which is on campus, is a sort of a big thing on campus. There's active learning, there's constructive learning where you're working on it by yourself, you're making something by yourself. And then there's interactive learning, which is actually a social interaction where we work together to build something. And if I work with Cliff on something, he will bring perspectives and experience and ideas that I have never thought of because he has a different life. And together, and he can learn from some of my experiences and we can come up with something that is better probably for more people than just for one. Students actually, I'm going to jump over to student perception. Students get this. I just surveyed 90 students, seniors in a physiology class, and in my initial coding, and this is qualitative coding, it was something I did in like an hour, so it's not perfect, but they like the applied work. And now applied work is everything from let's all work together on this problem to let me work on something individually. But they understand that they don't always necessarily get it and they need knowledge checks. And whether those knowledge checks come from the instructor, ideally, right? It'd be great if every time I had a question, I can ask the authority figure, am I getting this right? And they would be there to say yes. But the reality is that in a class of more than 5 people, that's not possible. But in a group of 5, it's more possible to get that feedback from peers. So groups let you do that in a way and have more feedback, more knowledge checks more immediately than we can do that as an instructor. James.
I find it interesting that discussions is so low on here.
And actually, this is not low. That's of 90 people and the coding that I do. I ask them for their favorite or their best learning activity that they've experienced. So it's not a question of is this good or not good? It's a question of did this make their best? If 18% of them found it to be their best, that's actually really high, I think, because of that 846, a lot of them would have included discussions probably in there as, yeah, that was helpful. So it's a somewhat misleading.
Thanks for putting that in context.
I think one of the things that comes to my mind as I listen to your question about does social learning work? A number of us have talked about having an interest in the online space. So one of the things that I find, so I believe social learning works. I think in the online space, there's a trick to get it into work, right? Like there's a learning the right skills of how to facilitate an online discussion or how to set your students up with the right structure so that when they're not sitting in the same physical environment, they know what the rules are and how to do things so they maximize it. I always recall being on an airplane from Madison to Minneapolis a couple of years ago, and there was a student sitting in front of me that was talking about desire to learn and how much they hated desire to learn. So I was just being a fly on the wall and listening to the student talk to the person next to them. And what they ultimately said is they hated desire to learn because one of their largest grading components was a discussion forum, and they were simply graded on the number of posts that they made in the discussion forum, right? So
Check the box.
they were not using good pedagogy within a social learning tool, so it had the opposite effect. And the student really grew to resent the whole online course that they were in. So
And one of the big elements of social learning is based on affinity spaces. It's based on, am I interested in this topic? And if I can find other people who are also interested in this topic, then it naturally occurs. And if you think about groups or online groups or online pages that you go to, online comments or discussion forums that you might be involved in. And I'm thinking back to my doctorate in gaming, where the gamers will create these walkthroughs. If you think about how many, and you might know kids who watch YouTube videos of people playing games, video games, they're playing that to see how they do that. They hear that voice. It's social learning. Somebody is creating something and showing them how they do this thing. It's demonstration learning. It's kind of an amazing thing, and they get millions and millions and millions of views. That all happens informally, right? If you take the same thing and you bring it into the confines of an online classroom, now all of a sudden, they might not want to be there. Maybe it's a class that they have to take to get the certification. The tools aren't necessarily always as beautiful and easy, and because there is this, I need to assess you, so let me find some ways to assess you. I'm going to have you post and comment on these things. Well, that starts adding rigor and structure and all of these extra things that kind of get in the way of me just trying to explore and find out, how do I do this thing better? How can I learn from other people on that? So it happens all the time in online spaces, but it doesn't happen so well in formal online spaces, and it's not as much fun because of all the extra stuff that we have to put on it in order to say, oh yes, you are getting this, and this is how I can measure you. And I think that's a big problem. It's also the big problem about groups, right? And group assessment and peer assessment, making sure that somebody's interested, that they all carry their own weight. What are thoughts on that? Or no, let's go back to the previous thing. I just brought us into a new topic. Let's finish up that last one. Online. Other thoughts on online spaces? Have you had any fun online activities that have been structured?
Yes.
What was fun about them?
Creating the activity in such a way so that the students can be creative and show a little bit about who they are. Now, granted, I'm in perhaps a special situation in that with languages, there's a lot of room for students to connect content to their personal lives, which may or may not be true in other disciplines. So I have seen them have fun. Creating the right kind of prompt or situation to encourage that isn't always the easiest thing. But they're certainly more engaged when that happens.
Personalization is a huge part of it. We also know from good learning practices that whenever you let students have a choice, the more choices that you let them have, unless it's like you have a billion choices, that's overwhelming, right? But if I say, this is the one way that I want you to do it, follow these rules very closely, that's boring. That's awful. And if I'm not interested in that, that's, one of the layers of hell or something. It's awful. But if I have the choice of do that or do this other thing, well, now at least I have a choice. I am a American free person, whatever. I have ability to decide at least a little bit. If I have 3 choices, that's even better. Some constraints, those 3 choices, offer models. And maybe then there's a 4th one that says, using the models of the first 3, what's the 4th thing that you can do? Now it's wide open, but it still feels constrained because it has to match up with the structure that we're working in. And I think that ability to personalize lets them show each other that they have an area of expertise, and it lets me shine in the area that I might not be good at what every other one else in the group is good at, but if I can somehow make this project about what I'm good at to showcase the skills I do have, I'll learn about all of these other skills. James.
Perhaps I can give you a personal example that illustrates.
Oh yeah, I love examples that illustrate.
So the very first time I taught online was for a history course. And the way we structured it, unfortunately, we just tried to take the face-to-face and just put it online. So we had discussion sections, but there were like 18 to 20 students. And we made discussion like 25% of the grade. So this is a serious chunk of the grade. The thought that would encourage people to actually use the discussion boards. It was horrible. We had a minimum 2 posts a week. You have to reply to somebody. That's all anybody did. I even said, you need to read your fellow students' posts, and I can tell when you do it. Very, very few people did. So yeah, it was just like, what's going on here? Horrible experience. Would have, if I'd been less adventurous, I guess it would have turned me off online learning entirely. Same class, retaught it 2 summers ago. And I was like, I know I need to rethink this whole online discussion. So
Yeah,
what
what
do
do
we
you
do? And the feedback that students were giving, part of it was they're like, there's just so much work in the course, I don't have time to do any discussion. So rethought the workload, but then made smaller groups, gave them some ability to choose. Like we started off with a name your group. So we had the Kissingers and the Spice Girls.
Great. And even like that has no academic value at all to your class, but it gives them a choice in their learning. It lets them personalize, even at a very shallow level, but it's important and it's useful. It helps them sort of decide on their own.
So we shrunk groups down to 4 to 6. And so, because the big thing is when you have 18 in an online discussion, it's so easy for people to get lost in the woodwork. And then we also incorporated group assignments with those same groups, so that who you were talking about in discussion section with was also who you were working projects on throughout the semester. And it was night and day difference. And in fact, there were a couple of discussions that I think were probably even better than a face-to-face. Now, it wasn't true for all groups. There were some groups that still, they kind of did the bare minimum and got by, but it was so much better than the first attempt.
Yeah, it can work, but how did you assess the second time? Did you still have the same level of assessment?
But so we actually tried, and another thing that I think was very important is, the first time it was just like discuss, and that's giving them a billion options, and I think they were just overwhelmed. The second time we're like, all right, you need to respond, and here are models for how you respond and talk. You gotta make sure you have this in your statement or this in your statement. So it wasn't just like, you have to respond like this, but giving them some of those ground rules so they have some sense for like, oh, you want me to say, don't just say +1 or I agree with this. You want me to say why I agree with this or why I disagree, giving them some of those ground rules. And then we also, because the first time I was like, okay, you have to post at least 2 times a week. This time we're just like, you have to be involved. Like we did not put any numbers on there because we didn't want them to be like, oh yeah, I hit my 3, I'm good. And then we're like, if you have any questions about how you're doing, you can check in with your instructor to see if you're meeting, expectations there. And then we also had a peer review component part of it.
So there's something there with there's a loosening up, right? Instead of putting constraints on things. Do any of you do yoga at a place that says by donation versus by class? And now, do you notice that people end up paying the teacher more if it's not specified than if it
I've
is?
never asked her. I don't know.
There's probably a reason she does that, because she's found out that,
I know
If
that
you
works for
don't-
free tours by foot.
right, it
Totally.
works
They're
more
the
often
best
if you
tour
don't
guides ever.
constrain. Once you start putting specific quantitative targets on there,
Yeah.
it's sometimes, and not in all cases, I'm sure that there are plenty of examples of people that would be like, cool, I don't have to pay, here's my quarter, or whatever. But in building a community or a cohort, and it's also kind of a measure of, am I building a community or cohort, so it's good feedback for the instructors. Am I providing value? Yeah, they're paying me more than if I charge $5 per or whatever. So I think that there's something about that. Let them decide how much, and if it's a valuable thing, if you give them the opportunity to make it valuable, you may be surprised.
That kind of goes back to a previous teaching lab when we were talking about rubrics and designing them so that you're looking at the quality, not the quantity.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I stand my soapbox here. The quantification of education isn't always great,
But everybody wants data.
but everybody wants easy data.
Yes.
Everybody wants data, that numbers that they can put into graphs and measure, yeah. And that's maybe the biggest, that's a
And
bigger
quality is gonna be
challenge.
subjective too. What my opinion is of the quality of that writing versus your opinion of that quality. I guess it's.
Other things that you've done in online spaces that have worked.
I've wondered, and what you're trying to do with this, if I'm not mistaken, is you're trying to replicate a face-to-face experience, right? And I mean, understanding that we can't always be together all the time, we're trying to replicate that essence. But of course, we lose things as soon as we go digital. So do you guys ever like spend time when you're talking to your potential students, do you ever explicitly call that out? Like, tell them, I don't want to be arbitrary, and I'm not going to be able to tell you everything about how to behave in these online discussions, but just remember that what we're trying to do here is we are trying to replicate a human interaction. And if you were in a conversation, would you ever just say, me too? I mean, some people, and in some dynamics you would, but but very seldom would you just simply say, yeah. Okay.
And there's the thing about the social etiquette of online space that is different, because we've tried to make it the same and it doesn't work
And
because
it's
so many
not.
things are missing.
Exactly, I was gonna say, because I'm at the same time trying to make it the same, you're also acknowledging this venue is great for those who are not very socially comfortable. So that's the advantage. So for them, maybe that kind of a discussion would fall flat on them because they're saying, I don't really engage publicly anyway, so I don't know what. I don't know. There are times when it just feels like if we could have that conversation with the students, that it might just, might be a necessary thing to spend 10 minutes on at the beginning of your first class to say, here's the deal. Because I have done enough of these like dial-in teleconferences thing where you're just trying to say, you gotta say something, let me know you're there. Reply when I ask a question, jump in, ask your question. It's so hard to get them to do that.
Learn and then Greg.
So I wonder how much, when we're thinking about traditional undergraduate students or even early stage graduate students, the social media environment in the past, however many years, has impacted that, because they spend a lot of time just doing on stuff, right?
Sure.
And so
Yep.
how do they even know how to interact
That's right,
effectively,
that's right.
socially?
I'm
in
bringing
general,
I'm
right?
bringing my
In an
baggage.
online environment, is the same as a nod and a me too or I hear
Right,
you sort of
and
thing.
so-
Part of that conversation is you need to, at the very least, acknowledge with a like.
Yeah.
And they do already, that is their,
Right,
That's
so
what
how,
it is.
so then the question is, how do you expand your question to them to lead them to do more than just a like? Because that's what they're
I think
used to doing.
At the root of the frustration.
Well, I wonder too, though, is because they, a lot of my classes have external Facebook groups that the students just engage with one another. They get, trade notes and stuff like that, and
on their own,
on their own.
by themselves,
Right.
not structured by the instructor.
Exactly, and they sound very vibrant. We have students that are making memes based on lectures and stuff like that, and it sounds exciting when they
Are
talk
you
about
invited
it.
to any of those?
No.
Okay, that's probably part of it.
So, right, yeah, and I think that's great. But it's like, how can we? It might be that they're just doing, Me Too, or just like when we're around because we're the grown-ups and they don't want to get in trouble.
So maybe we need to ask them to respond with a meme instead of a paragraph.
Right.
That's a great assignment.
You know?
It's a great assignment.
I think this is a situation where, how you approach, haven't done a lot of online discussions, I don't have that as part of my course, but how you approach an online discussion and how you approach an in-person discussion, there's ways you can improve both that involve things like giving the students a little more ownership about what they're talking about, but also giving them, here, you're gonna read this and think about it and maybe answer some questions on your own first before you even go look at the discussion board. Same thing in a lecture when you're like, who knows the answer to this question, and nobody's gonna say anything. But if you instead say, talk to your neighbor for 10 seconds and come up with something to talk about, and then you get a lot more. So I think part of I personally totally hate discussion boards, especially in Canvas, which I've said many times, but because they feel so separate from how you would normally interact with a human being. And if you have no preparation going into it, I think that's an additional wall. So maybe as much as possible, sort of modeling it, because a successful in-class discussion, it won't have any success if you just walk in and say, talk about this now, because they have no context for it. So
I really like your use of the word modeling. And what I was gonna say before is, to me, this also feels like an instructor presence conversation, like where your question starts with this. We have worked with some instructors who said I wanna build my course and I'm gonna have these groups or these discussion forums and they're gonna turn stuff into me, but this class is gonna kind of run itself. No. You have a responsibility to
Famous last words.
Yeah.
to have a presence in the course so that you can model to your students. Or if they say me too, to try to draw out from them, okay, what do you mean by that? So that's not really, give us more detail on it. Whether it's discussion forums or whether they're in groups, doing group work and then turn it into something that isn't quite where you want it to be, you still have that instructor presence piece. Which
you do in person too.
Yeah,
You
right.
wouldn't just go, ideally you're walking through and kind of listening and checking in here and there. So
And I think it also, the instructor presence piece, is it Laura? Is that the right name? Lauren? I also wonder if your humor piece can potentially have a little bit of an impact from instructor presence as well. We've had a number of instructors who've sort of, found ways to interject almost like either weekly wrap-ups or, things that have happened in the week that they've observed that they can kind of turn a humorous light on. They can, again, by the tone that they set and the way that they model things, perhaps build a little bit of that.
A teacher created weekly meme.
There you
Well,
go.
Based
I
on
mean,
what
you
happened.
can use Google and find me.
Right.
I do that.
Yeah.
I should try that
That's
my
like
next
doing
online
this
course.
So I wanna talk about this for just a second here. Have you ever heard of the SEMR model? So the SEMR model says, when we get new technologies, the first thing that we do is we try to directly substitute what pre-tech stuff is. So we go in an online space, we try to make it exactly like a face-to-face environment because we're familiar with the face-to-face environment, our students are familiar with the face-to-face environment, so now let's move here and let's pretend that we're in this face-to-face environment. It's a good way to try stuff, hardly ever a long-term solution. If you look at any technology, it moves from the substitution to, all right, now, what are some other things we can do in this face-to-face, in this non-face-to-face environment? So, for example, the discussion posts, instead of saying, what are your thoughts on this? Why not have them say, respond with a meme? Or, better yet, the internet is so full of all kinds of knowledge. let's have them go curate some of that knowledge and say, respond with an appropriate web page that talks about this in more depth than you would write yourself. Because I can write a paragraph and I will not be as complete as if I found a website. So why not just link to that website? In order for me to do that response, I'm going to have to go to several websites to find one that makes sense. And by going several, I'm going up to Bloom's taxonomy cognitive level of analysis and synthesis, right? I need to start going up to that level. And now all of a sudden, I've had my students curate more information on this, more resources that I don't have to do. So it makes my life as an instructor easier. And it's a way for them to sort of start to do some of that.
With that, in the discussion, if they're providing, whether it's a meme or other websites, that seems to me like it would create further discussion in the group because they would look at each other's stuff and actually have something to respond about.
It builds in this jigsaw because I might find all of these sources about X, Cliff might find all of these sources about Y, still related to the major topic. You might find all of these things about Z. Now we've got 3 different areas of expertise because I've done the research on X, you've done the research on Y, you've done the research on Z. We come together, we've got roles or areas that we've got specialty in, so we can get that affirmation, an area of expertise that we do. And you're right, it makes it a lot more significant than just spouting an opinion in 20 words, because that's all I need to do to get the points.
Now, the SAMR model I thought was originally written as the way teachers went into putting their content online. At first, they would take what they did traditionally and they substitute it with an online version of the exact same thing, which, as James pointed out, doesn't work. And then they moved
It's
up.
it's clumsy, right? Because it's a different medium.
Right, and it moved up to being actually rethinking how to engage the technology in more effective ways by the time
If you think about documents, right, there's a handout, you hand it out, everybody has it. In an online form, you click the link to it, now they can download it and print it off themselves.
Right.
Substitution. Augmentation, now they no longer have to download it, they can see it right here. So boom, we've added this extra thing. Or maybe we've added comments because we're in Google Docs right now. So they can comment on it. It takes that document and it adds this extra thing. Modification. Modification with Google Docs would be like, let's create this Google Doc ourselves. All of you put together these different things. So it's not a handout that I've designed, it's a handout that we designed together. And the redefinition is, it's no longer a handout. It's a collaborative document that documents our learning. So that would be like one example. I just made that up, it's not perfect. Of this progression through these things. The same thing in face-to-face versus online environment. What are some of these new things that we can do when we move to an online environment? Especially, so technology, group assignments, and what were the things that we could do face-to-face group assignments? What are some of the things that we can do when we have the internet and this easy shareability? Collaborative tools, constructive tools, things like YouTube for creating videos, or so many of the other tools available out there for creating. And then redefinition, can we just change everything altogether? I want to take a second to unpack humorous, or humor. One of the things that was one of my favorite keynotes that Jim G had done at one of the Games and Learning symposiums was he talked about fun versus engagement. And everyone says, oh, I want to make my class more like video games because video games are fun. And if you've ever played video games, you know that some parts of it are fun and some parts of it are just painful, but it's still engaging. I'm thinking of World of Warcraft many years ago. In order to get to the next level, you've got to get all of these points. And you've got to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And by doing it, it's drill and practice, right? Good pedagogical model to follow, except it's done in this digital virtual environment. And it's not fun, but you get rewards all along the way. So it sort of keeps the, what are those, is it endorphins spiking? Whatever those things, you get the little shots of energy and such. And you stay up all night, you're exhausted, but you're doing it and it's engaging. but you would not say, oh, I had so much fun last night playing that. It was like, oh, I got through until I'm finally, you wake up exhausted if you wake up. I don't think school has to be fun.
Not fun, but humor, so that so it's not a dry, boring
So
lecture.
serious all
Okay.
the time.
That there's some
Like-
sort of, but I think humor brings in that engagement.
I think, yeah, there is a connection between humor. All right, and this is another reason where groups are better, because I can tell jokes in front of students all day and I'll just get eye rolls, like the old Uncle eye rolls.
Those are fun too, though.
Right, dad
Right,
jokes.
exactly, they're still listening because you do that.
Yes.
But their jokes are much more relevant. So if I can have them work with each other, they know what's going on in their lives way more than I do. So it can be more engaging to have them work with each other. As soon as I step into that room, that Facebook page or whatever, they stop having fun. It starts to dry up sometimes. So being able to take a step back out of the
Right.
classroom and let them work is sometimes a good idea.
The only tricky thing about humor in an online, like I try to make my students laugh at least once, usually it's me just making fun of myself or something, or making a really terrible joke, and I get eye rolls, and I love that. But with the online space, it's a little humor and translating that, especially if it's just text-based,
Right.
it's tricky. So that definitely is hard. I could see meme use or something that's like
Yeah,
obviously
sure.
like this is humor in the form of a picture that is
Yeah.
amusing, being a little easier, or even if you have like a short weekly video that's a video of you, so that the humor points are more clear. Because that's tricky.
There's a science teacher at UW Platteville who starts off his class many days with these science videos that have like real content to them, but they're narrated on top of it. It might be, and they're hysterical, because like he'll talk about, what this little animal is saying,
The best.
maybe, and so throwing things like that into an online course, I could see, the students would want to watch those things, right?
For sure.
And so they're still getting content, but they're
Is it true facts?
laughing along.
True
with it.
facts.
Yeah.
Frogfish is pretty good.
True facts, carnivorous dragonflies at the
Our
top there.
story begins with a small fish named Jimmy. Jimmy is about to embark on a remarkable journey in the coral reef. Oh, shit. We have a problem. Jimmy's dead. The 50 or so species of frogfishes are members of the anglerfish family Enteneridae. They are short, stocky, and scaleless, and often look like little pieces of garbage. Frogfishes are
All right, I love this.
So, yeah, I mean, he
There's one where
uses
he's
those
just, like,
all the
listing.
time, and then of course connects it to his content, so there are ways to bring in humor.
I use these, and it's not at all connected to my content.
Well-
Other than I let them know I really like animals of all kinds, and I tell them my 2 favorite animals at the beginning of the semester, and then it's a quiz question later, because it's cuttlefish and tardigrades, which most people don't know. Thank you. But yeah, you can definitely, that's a great way to find something that's already funny, so you don't have to be
So you don't have to be the one
it's
that's
not all
funny.
coming from you.
And I think that there is, if the farther away you are in age to I'm lucky to be closer in age with mine.
For now.
So for now, but it's coming, and I'm sure
I know, it's getting further away.
They're less into like my Harry Potter explanations and stuff like that. You're a nerd now, and it's fine. But I think there is, if you need to, you have to be willing to look a little dumb in
But you
front of
can
them.
include them in that too.
Right, and
Like,
so
what's your nerdy thing
yeah,
that you're
like
into?
luckily with teaching anatomy, I can, have them do things with me to be able to, have, we'll all join together and we'll stand in this strange way and, we'll roll our arm out to do this thing. And so that there's the group activity, people can look around or they'll just kind of, like that.
So I wanna
Jump on
challenge
one
you, how
foot.
will you do that online?
How well, so that would be,
That's for
that's difficult, but at least with languages, you could even bring in
Right.
like, you always think about the old books that are, giving you phrases like, how do I get to the store? Kind of thing, so you could even incorporate some ridiculous phrases like
The parody of
wanting to
parody's
say,
Often good.
Right, wanting to say, I'm sorry, I need to, get my air conditioner fixed, and it's totally out of context phrases. So it could be a way to just bring in and humor that way, that they won't necessarily need, to know the certain phrases, but if they're silly phrases, it's fun to know silly phrases in other languages.
Great.
I think your example of the anatomy one is really like, there has to be a degree of like confidence to be able to put yourself on video doing that. But I have a 17-year-old at home who's going into college next year, so I've watched her study and how much she finds humorous things just in between like little study breaks so that her brain can kind of refresh. And I can see her being a student in that kind of thing. And you talk about like a instructor presence, being able to show some like humility and self-deprecating humor, being able to show yourself doing that. And I would guess that students, they might not fall for the video of themselves doing whatever the funny thing is, but if you give them a space to post a video of them doing that, you have quite a few people probably would
And,
find a
yeah,
switch on
and
this.
we have them make videos to show some part of the human body or a test or something like that. And oftentimes in their videos, they'll include bloopers. We don't even, but at the end, they'll include some little bloopers. And it's very, very cute, and it's fun, and they love that now. So yeah, so it's great.
And it becomes a thing like, this is the part that I love about this. The modeling, the self-humility, the being willing to be vulnerable up there. If you model that, they'll pick up on that and they'll do it too. And then it becomes a good thing. Like, I'll add the blooper because it's value added to the process. And it also shows that they've done more than one thing, right? So you think about how long they've taken to do this. Do you remember the confessional videos back when YouTube was early on? It would always be somebody turning on and be like, "Hi YouTube, I'm da 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 da," and they were self-deprecating. I had my students do that in the freshman class that I taught. They hated it, and then they loved it. They hated it because it's embarrassing to do this. They don't know anyone else. But then it was a shared traumatic experience for all of them that they all witnessed each other. And then it became like, that was an immediate way to build cohesiveness within the class.
And I think it also helps to model being wrong sometimes
exactly,
as well, because sometimes I'll just misspeak.
Yep.
And you could say, "Oh, I just had a major brain fart. Sorry, guys," or "I lost my train of thought." And because with dealing with medical students, oftentimes they are very afraid of being wrong. Because they can feel really we're trying to get away with competitiveness, but if they think that they're wrong, or they're even afraid to raise their hand.
And people could die.
Right, exactly. And so if you don't admit that you
Not in
don't
the class,
know something,
no. School is a safe place
That's
for
right.
that feeling, hopefully.
right. Yeah, so getting them to admit that when they're wrong about something or that they don't know something is something that we are really trying to strive to do, and to just admit it in front of 3 people is hard for them. But when we can do it and say, "Oh no, I don't," they ask me a question, I have no idea. I don't, so that they like that.
John, can I say one
Yeah.
other thing? So here at UW, we have this thing called the Wisconsin Experience, which has these 4 characteristics that ideally we build in our students, one of which is empathy and humility, right? So this whole conversation we're talking about is also ways to build humility in our students by modeling it, and giving them the chance to toy around with that. The other one's relentless curiosity, intellectual confidence, purposeful action.
I love those.
Well, I mean, it definitely goes back to just overall social learning, right? Being able to not only deal with your own, struggles, but you're in a group, like you're gonna have to struggle through things together, which again, I think you can model where in a course, you're serious, you got work time, but then it's okay to also give yourself breaks, and it's okay to be wrong about something, because part of the whole point is trying to work through it. And that I think can help build stronger groups, because my class is a lab class, so it's all in person, hands-on for the most part. But I'm halfway through the semester now, so the groups because I design all the groups based on their feedback, and some people struggle initially, but we're getting to the point now that they've built confidence. They're 7 weeks in, like when they have a problem in front of them, the 2 people will actually talk about it and work it out before they go to an instructor. So it's really I love it. I'm so excited. So being able to, let them have the opportunity to fail, maybe find humor in something, and then pick up and keep going.
Well, and letting them have the opportunity in general.
Yeah.
Like I put down here, follow their lead.
Yeah.
And I want to bring in universal design for learning again. Oftentimes, the instructor's impulse is, I will design this activity for the students, it'll be great. And it'll be a thing that we think is great because we are who we are. And then we bring it out to the students and we realize after it fails that, oh yeah, they're 20 years younger than I am. Of course this isn't going to work. What was I thinking? But we miss that. If we ask them, they might not tell us exactly what's cool, but they'll do some cool things on their own. And if we let them have that space to do the things that they find engaging, then it becomes their class. It's their learning. It's not our teaching, it's their learning. It becomes about them. And people respond to things that are about us. Other topics that we have not hit here. Small projects versus big projects. Let's talk about that. That was another one of the things that we talked about in the leveraging tech to learn in, I think it was in this one, in the discussion I had following up with them. This idea of feedback. They need the feedback. And they want, study skills, time management. I said, what was the advice? I don't know that one. What advice would you give yourself 4 years ago? Because these are all seniors who are graduating. Study skills, time management, go ahead and ask for help, go to office hours, things like that. Those came out as the top ones. Life balance, I read that as resilience, recognizing that just because I failed this test doesn't mean my life is over. Ideally, if I fail the test, I lose a few points and it's not over. Right? If we have low mistakes that don't cost them everything versus a few huge mistakes or lots of huge mistakes that cost them their career. Those are things. So when we talk about small projects, we need to talk about scaffolding. We need to talk about building a large project out of many small projects that build onto each other. I think that is, and they get feedback all along the way. Both feedback from their peers, which will hopefully be rich and multi-perspective, but also some feedback from the instructor so that they are reassured that their students, and they start building trust in their groups to be able to give them good feedback. And I think that is one of the big elements of feedback that is often overlooked. The more that we can help our students build a trust in each other, the more they're going to trust each other in groups and have successful group projects. Somebody just had their hand half up. Maybe not.
I was just gonna add, I think definitely scaffolding, so treating a big project as if it's several smaller projects, not only is helpful to get better end results, because otherwise it doesn't go well, but also I think it really helps them set deadlines in a group setting, because that can be really tricky. They should, in theory, should be able to do it on their own, but having really places where they're going to check in with you or check in with somebody else is going to be really helpful. Something else.
Anytime you start a new group project, it's a new group trust building thing for them as well. So in addition to the academic side of it, there's a whole lot of social things that have to happen there where they have to be like, can I trust Heidi to do this? Or is she going to slack off and not pull her weight?
Has anyone done like social or like contracts for group work where they kind of check in at the beginning and maybe you all have to agree how you're going to communicate, what you're going to do in communication before?
That was one of the things that the seniors discussed as having worked in group settings.
Awesome. Yeah.
Another one is roles or responsibilities, not necessarily group number 1 is going to do this, group number 2 is going to do this, group number 3 is going to do this, but here are 3 things that your group needs to do. Consider splitting those up and having a lead for each of those. So giving them roles.
Yeah, or rotating, as I've seen some success with, like, every week, that role was jumped to the next person.
Yep. And those are another, they also talked about the actual peer assessment afterwards. And I think that there was some mix about that from the seniors, that some of them were like, yeah, it's not comfortable for me. Others were like, yes, we need that. Otherwise, I'll have somebody in my group who doesn't do anything. So there's a two
Oh,
edges to that.
within the group.
Within the group, yeah. So they say, you know, Heidi's always left early and she was didn't contribute.
I think that's a little bit easier in an online setting because there is some anonymity to it of that peer feedback, because we did over the last summer, a group project that was pretty much weekly. They just had to get together, not together, but do a set of review questions, work through them. And you could easily then pick out like who wasn't doing it. And then you could also pick out the people who were doing it but weren't paying attention, because they'd give that person full marks anyways. So there's some.
Did you have the students do that with each other, or was it something that you did as an instructor?
That was just on them.
Okay.
We gave them a bunch of review questions, pick the ones that, I mean, there's some that you should be able to answer just if you read the material, but if there's ones that you were struggling with, pose them to the group, and then the group would answer them, hopefully, for them. But again, I think I saw a lot more zeros than I think I would have seen like in an actual face-to-face.
Zeros, low ratings.
Yes.
Okay.
At the risk of being my usually difficult self. So this discussion kind of started when James too was talking about how he made a big change in his course and the impact of that. And what I'm seeing in this room are very few people on a very important topic for the success of courses.
That longitudinally teach across the years. I'm lucky enough that I get to be one of those people, and a lot of it's, we have a clinician come in and give a lecture, and then they disappear until the next year. And within the block that I'm working in, of classes, we are trying to just say, okay, all the clinicians that are gonna do, you have to like come in, and we're gonna tell you how we would like you to teach. That hasn't gone over well.
Right.
And that's understandable, they have really busy schedules, but I am bothered because people will come in and say, have you learned this yet? Or have you, or they start talking about something that they clearly haven't learned or clearly have learned, and because they haven't bothered to look at the rest of the curriculum. And so that is a problem that we are continuing, and part of it, I think we just need to make things required for people who are instructors. If you're going to be in front of a student, you have to do something. Maybe they have to do an online course on,
On how to
here are the good practices. Yeah, I think that's fine to start requiring people that, these are some of the things that you need to do if you're going to get in contact with students, just to get them, get them the information, because it's all out there. We have so much of it.
I think part of it's, as much as there's a lot of positive things about having bottom-up approach on this campus, we don't have a top-down. Like with the reaccreditation that's going on right now, they requested syllabi from everyone and found out like a large percentage of classes didn't even have one, or didn't have like the key basic information like learning objectives. And so there was this whole push to get that done. And so it's really hard from an institutional level because there's no one that says, oh, well, you have to, be certified in some way to do an online course. Like anyone on campus could start an online course, even if they don't really know what they're doing. Which is pluses and minuses. But yeah, I guess like within your own unit,
Yeah, it's been,
yeah,
to get I just want a cohesiveness, because the students notice and that it's in the feedback, but
sure.
there hasn't been anybody putting forth a solution yet to be like, well, maybe that's just how it is right now. So.
All right, so your homework for next time is to figure out this problem, work as a group, and And we'll start working out a proposal of how to reach all of the 5,000 instructors on campus instead of the 8, 10 of us.
Maybe some
today.
social learning can put some pressure.
All right,
Maybe it's just too big of a.
thank you again for coming, and bring buddies again, always, drag them. Hit a couple of check boxes on these blue sheets and stick them in the basket on the way out, please.
Thanks, John.
Thank you all.
Yeah, we were there and we talked about group work. Because I'm gonna change our group work, a smaller
Just like
group.
this
project.
guy.
Yeah, like a,
Can we get the
Never.
off of
yeah, problems with them
Since it's a
feeling
piece of rotten
they were
fruit.
separate.
Frogfishes are
Yeah.
small.
Yeah, it'll be
Look
hard.
at the glass
Once
picture.
the OT and
They are masters of disguise. A reddish frogfish blends in perfectly with the surrounding, oh no, the green thing in front just took a step. My bad. Each species has a camouflaging niche. This one, for example, has evolved to hide in a reef of grumpy old men. With all this hiding, things.
Why don't have students make these?
Especially when two expert hiders meet. Here a frog. Oh my God. Most frogfish are ambush predators whose mouths can open up to 12 times their resting size. Here the frogfish lies in wait, ready for unsuspecting prey to approach the seemingly harmless coral. Unseen, he will strike in the blink of an eye. Frogfish are equipped with many evolutionary modifications. In many varieties, the
All right, get out of here.
dorsal fin spine has evolved into a fishing
Another-
pole
Yeah, another minute and a half.
Instead of
tipped
having
with a
some, I'm
fancy
gonna try
man's
it.
mustachio that can be used
It's
as
the
a
same,
technique.
because it would also
Most
right?
frogfish do not have
That is the
swim
same
ladders.
unit.
These small gas-filled sacs give other fish buoyancy and help them swim. Therefore, the frogfish has modified
And the same kind
pectoral
of,
fins which help it to walk on
yeah,
the ocean
our
floor.
ideas of,
Sort
like, either
of.
a video or just.
The sargassum frogfish, however,